all for pounding and working to get the word out that this recall experience was a steal on democracy, and having a very vocal, irate minority try to hijack the state is not how we do business here. So I just want to thank you all for the muscle that you lent to that no on recall. Having said all that, I will tell you that because of COVID, we actually had to limit the number of bills that we could pass across our house into the other. And folks were given the magic number 12. And this, on the assembly side, they actually can author up to 50 bills. So from 50 to 12 is a huge decrease. But I will tell you, it as a result, we sort of, it lent itself to us having a rather anticlimactic end of session. Thank you, Jesus. We are going to hope that the same experience can happen next year. Some good things happened. We had a ton of money that we were able to push out into this district and districts across the state. Of course, that happened because of COVID, which is bad. And COVID also sort of exposed all of the fissures and the chasms that we have in the state that we need to fix. AB 333 ended up being a sleeper bill this year. That was a gang enhancement bill, which is not about letting people out of prison or jail who have been in gangs. It's a due process bill that says if you charge someone with being in a gang, you have to prove that they were in a gang. I have to tell you that I was actually personally attacked by the California District Attorneys Association. They sent out the most horrible floor alert I have ever seen in my life that actually attacked me personally and stated in immense falsehoods about the process and this particular bill. It got off the assembly floor with 41 votes, the exact number that was needed in order to get that thing passed. I was fortunate on the Senate side that we had more than enough votes to get it off of my house, but they were so irritated that they worked with all of their might on that other side. Happy that the governor signed it. It actually came out of his Penal Code Revision Committee, and all of the other bills that came out of that committee got signed as well. AB 118, the Crisis Act, thank you to everyone who uplifted it, finally got signed this year with a $10 million allocation. So now community-based organizations across the state can apply for funding to allow them to respond to 911 calls so that law enforcement don't have to. AB 124, another bill that unfortunately really got watered down by the District Attorneys Association and appropriations. I think I shared this with Cynthia. You know, the chairs of those committees are incredibly powerful and they make their own decisions. But this bill says that if you were incarcerated, circumstance behind your sentence had to do with human trafficking, sexual assault, or sexual abuse, that the judge is allowed to take that into consideration when resentencing you. And so that is incredibly important. There was a article last year about a young woman, Kiana Aldrich, who was sold. She was prostituted, she was sexually assaulted. Eventually she, went after her pimp and handled her business, and she was sentenced to life. And eventually she was actually released because of her attorney, because of the circumstances that she had to deal with that led up to that criminal behavior. 962 is a great environmental bill. We will now be able to reuse glass bottles instead of crushing them. While it is great that you can take a glass bottle to the recycling center and then it will get crushed down and reused. Yes, it is so awesome. That still takes a lot of energy. And so the goal is very similar to what is in Oregon and a couple of other states. If we are able to manufacture glass bottles that have a shelf life, a life cycle of 25 to 30 washes, then you can reuse that bottle. And you don't have to expend the energy to crush it to then crush the glass down and then reuse it, which is great, but we're trying to reduce the energy and the emissions, and we're trying to get into becoming a more reusable state. So very excited about that, and it will be well integrated into Cal Recycle, which was incredibly excited. So hopefully you'll be able to buy beer, you'll be able to buy wine, and then you can drink all of that, those libations. And then when you're done, return it to the center, to the recycling drop-off spot. They'll wash it, clean it, sanitize it, sterilize it, give it back to the distributor, because hopefully you're buying local and small, and they will use that bottle and put more libations in it. That's how you have a circular economy that works and saves the planet. AB 369 was a street medicine bill. The governor vetoed this. He had a very long veto message. He had a lot to say. We're going to wait to see if this thing, yes, because I too do it with milk, although I stopped drinking bovine milk. But there's a great, not Clover, but there's another group where you can recycle the bottles. So yes, we're going old school, Megan, we're going old school. Street medicine was vetoed. There is a new program that's coming online in January called Cal AIM. And the goal behind Cal AIM is to provide access to medical care to the hard to reach. So the Department of Healthcare Services seems to think that this will cover folks who are unhoused. I don't think so, but the jury is out. We're going to wait to see what the implementation looks like between now and January, when this thing will go online. And if it doesn't do what the department has promised me it will do, we will be reintroducing that bill. ACA 3 to take slavery and involuntary servitude out of California's Constitution got stalled. Every ACA, every SCA, every constitutional amendment was put on pause this year by the Speaker and the Pro Tem. They will all be brought back next year. So hopefully in 22, we can vote to say no to slavery and involuntary servitude so that we can give it to the voters of California for them to vote on. And then SB 679, which was a highly publicized, high profile bill to create a housing authority for the region of LA, that also got held up in the assembly. And we are hopeful that we'll be able to bring it back very early in January. It will require an urgency clause, which will mean more people will be, needed to vote on it. But we have already started discussions. Very disappointing. That was a bill that would create an entity for the region of LA that would allow us to put measures on the ballot and also to get transfer taxes from homeowners so that we can finance real affordable below market housing. So we're going to see. I had a bill called Patients Over Profits that was held in the Senate Appropriations, which basically said that you cannot have these hospital conglomerates saying no to offering you care because it costs too much or because you're a woman and you want reproductive health care. And there were a couple of other bills that also stalled out, which we will be looking at bringing back this year. Not a lot of drama on the Senate side. I want to say thank you to Cynthia and the club for actually staying on Senator McGuire's behind to make sure that SB 98 came back to its real self. And if anyone was listening, I actually did ask the question on the floor before I voted on it. I said, tell me again, for the people in the cheap seats, did you take out the crazy amendments? And he went through a very long diatribe explaining what happened and that it was in the right form. I said, I do not know if I can go back to Culver City if this bill isn't handled. So thank you for raising the alarm on that. The hope is that next year we will also have a budget surplus and we will be able to offer real investments into districts across the state, and that we will also be able to fund more deeply some investments that need to happen with our state departments. I know I will be doing an appointments workshop. We will also be doing wouldn't it be great if this bill became a law? Both of those will be happening before the end of the year, and would love for you all to share your thoughts and ideas about bills that should become law. And we're also going to be starting a tour on urban farms that are in the 30th Senate District. So I think that's it, because I want to make sure that our assembly member has time to share his good news. But just thank you so much for all of the support and the love and the action. Bravo, bravo.
Thanks. It's always great to have you or your staff come visit. Please come back when you can spend some more time with us. I know there are a lot of people who have a lot of questions, and you can imagine. So without further
and also
ado,
Great Culver City has its electric fleets, and more will be coming online. I rode on it. It was super quiet and it was very nice, fuzzy seats.
All right, Assembly Member Bryan, the floor is yours.
Before we get into this transition, one more time for Senator Kamlager.
Oh, curious.
It was a hell of a session in both chambers, and to know that she was over on the Senate side gave me a lot of comfort on the Assembly side, and I think I was the same for her, especially on the tough bills and the tough votes. Culver City, you are in strong hands with us, and I'm grateful to represent Culver City. Grateful to represent the entire 54th. Today's been a deep day of reflection of my time in Culver City and my time in the legislature. And now coming towards the end of the day, all I really feel is gratitude to be in a position to do good for others and to do good for our community. And to that goal, we got into the legislature and we got busy. Literally right away. I was sworn in. And a lot of you know this because you came to the town hall last week, and it's good to see you again. But I was sworn in and I came back to my desk and I voted on something like 80 bills right away without any staff yet, except Caleb, who wasn't on payroll, but was doing the reading with me. We read through all of the bills, all of the major environmental bills, all of the major criminal legal system changes that were on the table, all of the major economic bills slated in our recovery. I believe, like Senator Kamlager, that we're going to have resources again next year, but wanted to make sure that the resources we had this year went to the right places, which is why my vote got in, to make sure that we had free school lunches for all kids in all schools, regardless of grade level, which was big for me when I was a kid and my 12 brothers and sisters. Make sure that we had universal TK or more childcare slots, or made the investments that we need to make in our essential workers. One thing was the day that I got in, I put in a budget request. My first letter on Assembly letterhead, and it was for a Reproductive Justice Institute at the UCLA Law School. I did that in collaboration with Planned Parenthood and others before we knew that Texas was about to go crazy. But I think we all had a good feeling Texas was going to go crazy because every so often they go a little crazy. So we put those resources in, got that approved. Also got resources for Black Studies at UCLA. Assemblymember Bloom helped me lock down $20 million for affordable housing on the VA, right on the edge of the west side of the district, to make sure that we could finish the first leg of a 1,600 unit project. It's a 10-year project, but the first 200 units should come online next summer. So really, really excited about that, because we only have 4,000 veterans who are houseless in all of Los Angeles. And so a 1,600 unit veteran housing project, it would actually be the largest housing project in the country and would take us quite a bit further. In my 6th day in office, I partnered with Assemblymember Luz Rivas to become the lead author of AB 1043, which I was incredibly excited to share with all of you and with my family to have my first law. AB 1043 was signed by the governor. There was a signing swearing ceremony with 27 other housing pieces of legislation, and I got to be there to get a copy of my first bill being signed. And it's a crazy feeling. It's hard to explain, but I feel like you all shared it with me. What AB 1043 does is it establishes an acutely low income and acute poverty category and into our housing laws. Right now, deep poverty is the lowest that we go. That's 0 to 30% of an area's median income. The problem with that is if you're living with 0 to 15% of the area's median income, the cap on your rent is still 30% of that 30%. If that's too many numbers for folks, it means people that were making $17,000 a year or less, the lowest their rent could be capped previously was 60% of that income. Now, because of this law, it's 30% of that income. The thinking behind it for me was that for every 10 people we get off the streets, 11 people fall into houselessness, right? And so it's not just about getting people the wraparound services and getting them housed. It's about keeping people in their house, keeping people housed. And the way to do that is to start from the bottom and lift our way up. It means going forward too, for all of the resources that the state puts into affordable housing, we can require a certain percentage of those be units for folks who fall into that acute poverty category. So it gives us a little bit more leverage in the housing game. I also jumped in and co-authored another 10 bills with my colleagues, one of which I campaigned very strongly on because it was near and dear to my heart, and that was SB2, of which Senator Kamlager was also in the co-authorship. SB2, previously in California, you could be fired from one law enforcement agency for misconduct and hired at another one. So I get fired from the LAPD for serious, gross, negligent misconduct, even lethal conduct, and then go work for the Culver City Police Department. And that can't stand. We were one of only 4 states where that was the case. It's a bill that died in the assembly in the same year that George Floyd died. Tatiana Jefferson died, Breonna Taylor died. And so when that came back around to the assembly floor, Senator Bradford, the lead author on the bill, he made some important compromises at the end, some of which I think we're going to have to go back to clean up personally, changing the decertification threshold from 2/3 to, or from a simple majority to 2/3, and removing the requirement that 2 seats on the board have to be folks who have been directly impacted by police violence. Both of those were changed at the last minute to help the bill pass. But it gives us a foundation to build on. And we're no longer one of 4 states that are behind the rest of the country. And that's really good. I also co-authored with Senator Henry Stern SB 406, which is a bill that requires CalGEM to better keep data on our oil wells on their website in a user-friendly way, a very accessible way. It also allows us to report not just for business owners or property owners who live within a mile of an oil well, but everyone who lives within a mile of an oil well, any negative public health externalities you might be feeling, whether it's trouble breathing or et cetera. I jumped into the co-authorship behind the garment bill, SB 662 by Senator Durazo. Before, we used to pay garment workers per piece for every piece of clothing that you made, and that hourly rate actually came out to less than minimum wage, which is unconscionable. So we fought, we rallied, we got that signed by the governor as well. Nancy Skinner proposed the Momnibus bill this year with Black Women for Wellness. Norbese Flint helped lead that charge. Black Women for Wellness was our nonprofit of the year in the 54th Assembly District. And so I jumped onto that bill. It's going to allow us to look at pregnancy-related deaths in a more comprehensive way and collect new data to specifically close racial gaps. Black women have the highest infant mortality rates. And Senator Kamlager was a champion as well on that. That bill was signed by the governor. It's also going to expand access to doulas and midwives for all women. So incredibly excited to do that. We worked on foster youth placement with Nancy Skinner. We worked on EDD reform with Chad Mays. The sub-minimum wage was a very important bill for me. I have 2 little brothers who are special needs. My little brother, Evan, suffers from cerebral palsy, and my brother, Paul, has autism. And in California, and in a few other states across the country, we allow for certain employers to pay people with disabilities less than minimum wage. And when I say less than minimum wage, I don't mean less than $15 an hour in California. I mean less than the federal minimum wage. And that is just not right. It's equal pay for equal work, regardless of your race, regardless of your gender, regardless of ability. And so we had to change that law. We fought very hard for it, got that signed by the governor. It's been a pretty exciting session. Another one of my favorites, I co-authored and floor jockeyed. It was the first bill I ever floor jockeyed, which what that means, by the way, is it means the senator got it out the Senate and they handed it to you and said, hey, you take this thing over to the assembly. You rise up, you convince your colleagues this matters and move it through. My first bill to floor jockey was SB 416 by Senator Hueso. What it does is in California and all states, if you're incarcerated, you are eligible for a Pell Grant, just like anybody else. The problem is there are some for-profit institutions that feed off of that Pell Grant. They've done it to veterans. They've done it to other vulnerable populations, whether it was Everest College, DeVry, or any of these other for-profit universities that have been exposed for their malpractice. What this bill does is it prohibits CDCR, state corrections, from contracting with those for-profit institutions and only allows for them to contract with public accredited universities. I would argue they should do all their programming with UCLA. I think Rick Tuttle would stand with me on that. If you're going to do it, you might as well go with the best university in the country. But it allows for us to set that standard so that anyone who's getting an education that we're paying for as taxpayers gets a high quality education, one that's accredited, one that's approved by all of us. I learned a lot of lessons this cycle coming in at House of Origin. And for those of you who don't know what that means, it means all of the bills in the Assembly. It's the last week for all of them to go to the Senate and for the Senate bills to go to the Assembly. That's when I got sworn in. So it's the busiest time of the year, followed by the second busiest time of the year, which is the end of session. And I feel like I had to do a year's worth of work in 4 months. And my team and I, that's what we did. We worked as hard as we could. We got on as many pieces of legislation as we could. We stood up and spoke unapologetically on the floor for the things that mattered. My chief of staff let me know last week before the town hall, there wasn't a time that you got up and spoke that bill didn't move forward, except for the very last bill of the session. And the very last bill of the session was one that would have sunset convictions for folks who are formerly incarcerated, who had served their time incarcerated, served their time on community supervision, and served several years after that without any incidents. It would remove the conviction from their record if they were applying for housing or a job or otherwise. And that bill was just a couple of votes short, but it's not dead. It'll be back in January. And so I'm committed to helping get that over the hump as well. Because in California, I believe we're a state that promotes opportunity and well-being, that we care about everybody having a fair chance to become their best selves and to move up economically and socially and to provide for themselves and to live in a community that's safe and protected and thriving. And the way we do that is by investing in the most vulnerable and letting that build up. It's the way that the 54th has invested in me. It's the way that I've invested in my team that we've built in the district office. I know many of you have met Shatara Byfield, who's on this call with us today. It's how I've invested in my capital team. And it's how we're thinking about our bill package from now until January. And that's the main priority of the office is to really shock the legislature with how thoughtful, how compassionate, how well researched our bills are that we introduce in January, and to really scare them when they find out the coalition that's behind every single one of them. And I'm looking forward to the Culver City Democratic Club and all of you to be a part of that coalition. You've always been a part of my coalition. And thank you for letting me come through tonight to share some updates.
Thank you, Assembly Member. We have a couple of minutes left if there's anything you'd like to add.
I'll take any questions. I'm
Okay.
not afraid of a question or whatever is appropriate for the agenda.
Well, my partner is the first one out of the box, and I think this question's on a lot of our minds. What's up with redistricting?
Yeah, what is up with redistricting? As a sitting elected, I can't have too heavy of a hand in it for a whole host of obvious reasons. But I saw some draft maps, some of which deeply concern me. You can see the way different political interests are splitting up certain communities. There's a feeling that some of the mobilization is going to culminate to the removal of a Black seat or a seat that's currently occupied by a Black elected official. My district and many of the maps is literally split. It's like I can either represent part of Mid-City and West all the way into Santa Monica. I mean, all of Santa Monica. Or I can go, edge of Culver City East and even get the airport and something based on the draft maps, but it's not over. We keep on fighting. You can give public comment. You can submit maps yourself. I'm going to remain hopeful that the people who live in our communities all across LA County are going to voice what's best for each of us, and the way the maps end up are the way they end up. And I will be running to represent my home, whatever number that is.
I see a follow-up question in the chat, and I have to admit that I don't know what level of government or body is responsible for drawing these maps.
There's an independent commission at the state level. There's also a commission in LAUSD and a commission at the city level. And so I was actually on the commission with LAUSD prior to running for office and had to step down from that position to serve. But there's an independent commission at the state level. They take public comment, they take suggestions, they take map. You can draw your own map of what you think the district should look like and submit that, and they will take that under consideration.
Well, thanks. I think we should probably let you have a chance to get a glass of water before you go to your next meeting. So thanks for coming, and I hope you'll be able to stop by and spend some more time with us soon.
Absolutely. Can I say one more thing?
as much as you want.
I think public service is one of the most important things you can do. And for me, there are nearly 500,000 people counting on me to lead with integrity, to lead with compassion, to lead with conviction, and to do the things that I believe are right and that our district and that our communities believe are right. And that's what I've tried to do to this point. And it's a commitment that you have for me that it's what I will always do. And so I'm grateful for y'all, and I can't wait to see you again soon.
There is one more from the chat, and you can certainly, say that you don't have the time for it, but SB 9 and 10.
Yeah, not my style to duck a question, believe it or not, even if it's a hard one.
But last question, you have another meeting, so last question.
Okay. For SB 10, I literally wasn't on the floor. Assembly member Kevin McCarthy had been exposed to COVID and sat next to me at a committee hearing in the Appropriations Committee. So I was prohibited from being in the building until I took a PCR test 4 days after being exposed to Kevin. And so I just literally wasn't there for medical reasons for SB 10. I didn't get a choice in it, actually. I would have gladly been there. For SB 9, we received thousands of public comments in opposition, not nearly enough in support. It was very tough for me. It is very tough for me. I'm one of 2 renters in the state legislature. And when I say I rent, I don't mean like my Sacramento place. I mean where I'm sitting right now. And I rent with my partner, Mara, who many of you have met, our Great Dane, Darius, who even more of you have met, and our best friends, Asia and Raheem, who are a young married couple, because that's what housing is like in Los Angeles right now. So I fully understand the need for greater supply. I fully understand the need for greater affordability. It's one of those things where I wasn't there for the conception of the policy. I didn't get to get my hands in the weeds with Pro Tem Tony Atkins and Senator Weiner and others to really help craft it. The district was speaking very loudly a particular direction, even if I felt like there was more nuance. And so I abstained from it. But I called the Pro Tem ahead of time because that relationship is important for moving your policy agenda forward. And I let her know I was committed to working on housing issues and that my first bill was a housing bill. And I was still the assistant majority whip. And so any bill important to the Democratic caucus is a bill that I went around to my colleagues, reminding them it's important to the caucus. And that's how that went down. And it's now the law. And I think we need to work collaboratively and collectively across our district, across our constituencies to make sure that however we implement those laws or any other laws coming down the books are ones that are done in a way that increase affordability, access to home ownership, and the preservation of the things that we love about our community. And so I think we can do all of those, even though at times it feels entirely contentious. I believe that we can do it, and I'm committed to working with all of you to do it.
Thanks so much. Hope we didn't get you in too much trouble with your staff.
Not at all. I will see you all soon.
Great. Thanks so much for coming. So we have a sort of extra speaker tonight. One of our members, Cecil Rhambo, is running for sheriff and asked if he could introduce himself to the club. And since we have a little bit of extra space, I'll pass him the mic.
I appreciate it. Thank you guys for giving me a very brief period of time. I'm Cecil Rambo, running for LA County Sheriff. I started public service in 1976, so I've been around for a minute or two. I spent 38 and a half years working for the county, started out as Parks and Rec lifeguard and went to the Sheriff's Department in 81. Graduated or retired from the Sheriff's Department after 33 years in that agency in 2014. And then I was recruited and became assistant city manager in the city of Carson. At the time, we were trying to recruit to the NFL to bring a stadium to Carson. And I did that for a couple of years, almost 2.5, and then got recruited to the city of Compton to be their city manager. And I did that for almost 2.5, 3 years, and left there and got recruited to be the chief of police at the largest or the 4th largest international airport in the world, Los Angeles World Airports in Van Nuys, which I currently hold that position now. So I've been in that position for 2 years. I'm running for LA County Sheriff because I have a vast amount of experience. I actually stepped away from the badge and did city management, did city administration. I was also part of the AB 109 Prison Realignment Community Corrections Partnership Program when that rolled out, and really sat on all the committees that helped look at alternatives to incarceration and reintegration into the community at that time, with probation, with parole, and with the faith-based as well as community-based organizations. And so much of how that looks today, I was part of that movement back then. I've been doing progressive behaviors in law enforcement, doing progressive things such as community campouts, community engagement, building youth centers, as well as tutoring labs and boxing centers throughout LA County, all the way from Lancaster down to Compton. And I have just a vast amount of experience and relationships built over the years through the LA City, LA County, Department of Public Health, Department of Social Services, Human Relations Commission, and I hope to be your next LA County Sheriff.
So thanks again for joining our club and stopping by to talk to us tonight. We will either have a full-on forum with multiple candidates or, co-sponsor one with another organization, to make sure that, everyone gets a fair amount of space. But we do have a bunch of extra time tonight. If anyone would like to ask Chief Rambo something in the next 15 minutes or so, we could definitely do that.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions, I can certainly answer
Okay,
those. I supported all the governor's bills.
I see Cynthia Hart.
Hello, Chief Rambo. I'm wondering, the current incumbent in the sheriff's office has come out in working very hard to recall George Gascon, who was endorsed by this club. How do you feel about the reforms that our DA Gascon has implemented?
Thanks for that question. I've talked to George a couple times. I knew George when I had hair and his hair was black. That's how far back we go. George and I have a great relationship. I just spoke to him last week. I embrace, George and I both agree that we can't arrest our way out of public safety and force our community safe by just simply overcharging and incarcerating folks. To that end, I support many of his programs. I understand, there's some victims advocate groups that have come out in opposition to George. But I told George that the things that we can't disagree upon, I know how to, disagree with George on issues without being disagreeable. For instance, some of the issues that I might have some concern are being too soft on gun crimes, particularly in a country that has so much gun violence. There are ways to deal with that, but when people use, guns to commit violent crimes on people, I think we really need to take a case-by-case basis, look at that. And I think he's committed to do that also.
Thank you.
Paulette, would you like to unmute and ask your question, or would you like me to read it? Okay, I guess I'll read it. The Sheriff's Department has been very controversial this past year. How will you work with folks who have worked for this department for years regarding racial profiling?
And other things. I mean, it's been accused of, misbehavior.
Right, Google LASD gangs.
Yeah. So, one of the things that I didn't get a chance to say in my introduction is I worked internal affairs at 2 different ranks as a lieutenant and a sergeant. I went in early 1992, right after the riots, and helped implement some the methods that you currently see in terms of early warning systems, as well as how we look at uses of force and deputy-involved shootings, as well as people who die at the hands of deputies, or even people that killed deputies. So we have a whole protocol that was really established back in the early 90s that I was part of. In terms of dealing with the deputy gangs, I helped Mike Gibson craft the legislation 958 on how that looks and how we really put some teeth into dealing with these cliques and these organizations, with these sub-organizations within the sheriff's department or any police agency for that matter. So, you know, it comes from the proper recruitment, the proper training, promoting the right people, letting them know from the top that certain things won't be tolerated. I know there have been accusations that I'm part of the Vikings and all these other issues, which I am not. So I've been around a long time and have seen them. So there's a zero tolerance for this. I met personally with Max Huntsman, who's the Inspector General. We had lunch this last week, and we talked about, you know, what do we do for a path out, people that want to, you know, remove themselves from these groups, just like gang members want to know how to get off the gang database or how to get off a gang injunction. You know, public trust is really huge. We're in the trust-based business. And if those deputies can't understand that, then there's other organizations they can go work for, quite frankly.
Kimberly Ferguson.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. I have kind of two questions that might go a couple of different ways, but the one probably leads on the back of what you've just talked about in terms of teaching de-escalation techniques for when you're out in the field. Is there going to be a whole new kind of way to teach the upcoming recruits how to deal with that and to teach not to shoot when people are running away, that sort of thing? Because that's the stuff that is so frightening when you see that you know, shown on the news. It breaks my heart when somebody was running away. Why do they shoot? It just makes us crazy. That's the first. Yeah. And then I'll ask the other one after you answer that one.
Okay, so yeah, de-escalation. One, you know, there was recently a whole slew of bills that the governor signed, and part of one of the some of those bills talks about de-escalation mandates. I have to be trained. De-escalation is trained in the academy. But I think where it can be really reinforced is during the training officer program with the trainees, and then also with your field sergeants, and then constantly talked about as in terms of changing the culture, in terms of being community engagement partners rather than you know, aggressive gladiator type cops. And and you get that behavior in those more challenging communities. I mean, I was the first full-time commanding officer in Compton. I have family and friends out there. And as a city manager and as a captain out there, I buried three 3-year-olds in murders. It's very, very tough to see that when you're working out there. And I understand some of the deputies' positions where they feel like they're the only line of defense between innocent people and you know, mass violence. But you know, Compton is one of the few stations that, to get the sheriff out of Compton, it has to go to a vote of the people. And that was because of the huge amount of community engagement and relationship building we did when I was a captain there. So de-escalation should be part of our culture. It should be talked about in the academy. It should be talked about in our training officers. It should be talked about in our trainees. And it really, because we go to the jails first, that's one of the first places we need to learn how to de-escalate issues, because it's, you know, the jail is full of bad people, let's face it. And there's always some things going on in jail that are violent in nature, and de-escalation is something that should be taught and rewarded. You know, you get what you reward. And so having, you know, commendable restraint, commendable de-escalation tactics, maybe we offer pay incentive for, you know, so many times you've de-escalated issues. So those things that you reward, you get more of.
That's a great idea. And this other question goes another way. Forgive me, I'll be really quick with it. In terms of the amount of shoplifting that's taking place now in our community, is there anything we can do to reduce that? Or is there any kind of plan to help prevent that type of activity?
Yeah, I just heard that report today in San Francisco where another Walgreens, I think they're going to shut down another 10 or 20 stores. So I think the misnomer is that because petty theft crimes have been, the penalty for those have been reduced, is that you can't do anything about it. What people don't realize is if you enter a store with the intent to commit that crime, it goes from a petty theft to actually a burglary, which is a felony crime. And even if they commit a petty theft and get caught repeatedly, they should always be, you know, caught, arrested, cited out. And then what happens is you get so many of those, and then it forces the district attorney to really take a hard look on, you know, some of these behaviors. But what I think I see happening, particularly up in San Francisco, and I don't want to misquote the San Francisco chief because I know him, or I'm not saying any disparaging things about the San Francisco
Mhm.
Police Department or how they prosecute, but there's a perception that people can just walk in with impunity and do these things. And the reality is that's not true. They can still get cited for petty theft. They can still get cited. They can still get arrested for burglary if it's discovered that they intended to commit the crime when they entered the store.
I need to get something.
Thank you so much for your answers. I really appreciate it. Hope we see
Okay.
you in the office.
Okay,
Oh, thanks.
Joan Davidson? Would you like to unmute and ask your question, or would you like me to read it?
I've got it. Thank you.
Oh, great.
I'd like to know your feelings or your opinion on defunding the police, because what we're seeing in San Francisco, we're also seeing in Los Angeles. We all watched on TV the people in Santa Monica running up and down the streets, and the police were just held back. They didn't do anything because they were overwhelmed. And it's my personal opinion that you can't lessen the amount of the force in LA. You can certainly increase other kinds of services, but I'm wondering what you would intend to do. I mean, I've personally been in a Staples store where a man came in, got a lot of products and ran out the door. And I asked the cashier why he didn't go get him. He said, we're told to leave him alone, not to do anything because we'll get attacked. And by the time the police come, these guys are long gone. So what's your answer?
Well, I think you know, the term defunding happened at a time where people were very emotional. I think as a sheriff, you know, it's a $3 billion budget, and people think that because the budget is so large, there's a lot of room for money to go elsewhere. They forget that the jail itself is $1 billion. And then we have 42 contract cities who pay for police services who could defund, but no one has done that. I think that as a chief of police and at the airport particularly, we haven't supported any type of reduction in services. In fact, we're asking for more services, but we also look at the way we allocate those services. So I'm committed to having a Metro Transit team as we build in our automated people mover. Same with the Sheriff's Department. You know, you look at the resources and you take a look at where's the best bang for your buck. If the best bang for my buck is going to be putting more teams together that really address mental health issues, work with a clinician, really address getting the homeless off the streets, dealing with some of these mentally ill people that you see, then let's put some more revenue towards those particular functions. And it's not a matter of defunding, it's a matter of putting right sizing and then putting those dollars where you think they're most effective.
Okay, Leah Pressman.
Yes, I just wanted to ask if you would enforce the vaccine mandate.
Yeah, you know, that's, I just talked to one of my union guys about that. So I've done PSAs to encourage all my staff to get vaccinated. I'm vaccinated. I actually use my father as an example. He wasn't an anti-vaxxer. He just got his vaccine late. He got his first shot, got sick that weekend and died 8 days later. So I put his picture up in the video, encourage my staff to get vaccinated, make sure that we wear masks. And even though I have over 1,000 personnel, we lost one security officer, and I'm going to bury an officer this Saturday to COVID, but far less numbers than we've seen in other police agencies. But at the airport, we strongly, we enforce the mask policy, and we encouraged, I think only a third of my officers refused to get the vaccine. But as the chief of the organization and for overall public safety, when the policymakers say we're going to enforce the vaccine, then it's just like anything else. We enforce, texting and driving, we enforce seat belts. These are all safety precautions that we enforce. So as a law enforcement official, my job is to enforce the laws that are enacted.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have a question? I do, but I would like to let y'all go first. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so trying to be inclusive. So I would say that I have a exceptional skepticism of the law enforcement community at this point. Maybe not that exceptional. I'm still waiting. I kind of think that Gascon might flip on us, but I was also very impressed that Sheila Kuehl had endorsed you. And I think that probably makes you the progressive choice in this contest. Can you talk some more about your other endorsements?
Yeah, so, Reggie Jones Sawyer, who's the progressive leader up in Sacramento, Lena Gonzalez down in Long Beach. I've got Pat Fury in Torrance. I've got your mayor in Culver City. I have the entire Black Legislative Caucus speaker. The Speaker of the House is supporting me up in Sacramento. I've got the mayor of Redondo Beach as well as a council member there. So there's a number of folks who, because I've been around so long, Steve Bradford, I knew Steve Bradford before he was even an elected official, same with Mike Gibson. So I've been around a long time, and quite frankly, they have seen me do things that would be called progressive as far back as 10, 15 years ago. Reentry, embracing, mothers who were rightfully so, their children were gang members and they got murdered, but they wanted to give back. They became grief counselors for me in some of the gang areas that I worked in, because I commanded the gang operations for the whole county at one time. And so when we'd have murders or shootings, we'd have our grief counselors come in. I work with Guillermo Cespedes over in the GRID program. I've worked with the Tingarides over in LA City. Worked with Connie Rice, who's also a big supporter. And so, she's a civil rights advocate, civil rights attorney, and to get her endorsement is not easy. And, she sued our department before, and I'm looking forward to working with folks like that to really bring about a sea change in how we actually deliver service. And one of the things I will tell you, and I understand your skepticism about cops. I mean, it's easy for us to fall back into a certain mentality depending on what kind of violent crime is going on or depending on what the flavor is. In some communities actually embrace certain types of police work. I just left Antelope Valley this past weekend, where I did live for a period of time. And I can tell you that the Antelope Valley is not like down here. They're not that progressive, quite frankly. And so those behaviors will be hard for me to put a wedge between the service, the delivery of service out there, how I want my deputies to perform, and then what the community, quote unquote, demands. And if they think that they can demand unconstitutional policing and that I'm going to accept that, then, we have a battle on our hands.
To keep the peace in my home, I'll turn the mic back over to Leah Pressman.
Okay.
A lot of what people were talking about with defund is really getting people who have mental health needs to get services from people who are trained in mental health. I'm a psychologist. And right now the county jail, which the sheriff's department runs, is the largest provider of mental health services in the county. And how do you see transitioning into more competent and compassionate care for people with mental health in LA County?
I think the biggest issue is, one, I think we need to fund folks in the Department of Mental Health and provide more robust staffing. One of the frustrations I had because I used to run the mental health response team when I was the division chief in the department. I only had four deputies and 4 clinicians for the entire county in a 7-day, 24-hour period. I would love to have, you need 4 of them at a station so that they can go out and be available on 24-hour, 7-day-a-week response. Because deputies, cops should not just be responding to people that are, having some mental health challenges. And we have it every day at the airport, quite frankly. You guys have seen the stories where the guy drove his car through the fence. Not that he was necessarily suffering from mental health issues. He was also high on meth. The other guy that jumped off the moving plane on the tarmac, same thing, high on meth, but also had some mental health challenges. So, that kind of stuff, I don't know that the clinician would want to handle by themselves, but I think there's room there to take a look at what we're doing with our dollars, because there's some mental health dollars out there that to the tune of billions that I would love to see tapped in to see where can we do better, particularly in the jail system. The jail system, a lot of people don't realize the county jail is the largest mental health facility in the county. And so there's a lot of training that needs to be done there and taken place. And perhaps, to be assigned in that unit there needs to be more mandated training and more regular training, and then some clear-cut guidelines on how and when deputies are actually called to intervene with patients, albeit they're in there for crimes, but they are still also patients. And so I think we really need to take a look at how we interact with people suffering from mental challenges, particularly in the jails and in the streets.
Yeah, there was someone killed today in Palms who seems like they were probably in a mental health crisis. They had a butcher knife. It was LAPD.
Yeah, and those are very difficult and challenging situations. How do you really de-escalate that? And really, I don't know if you've experienced this, but what I've experienced is giving them time, removing, people that can be hurt from them. Obviously, if they're running through a mall or something, that's a different issue. But if there's family members close, we often call in family members to try to talk to them, get them to calm down, because sometimes they're on drugs as well as having a mental health crisis. And so as the drugs wear off, they tend to calm down. I think there's room for us to really do an after action report as we get together as, public service officials, including Department of Mental Health, and how can we de-escalate this? How can we make this come to a better conclusion?
Kin Yi.
Thank you. Could you tell us what you think of mobile mental health units and your experience with them? Because Culver City just recently contracted such a mobile health unit for mental health issues. So we're curious what we can expect from that experience. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of experience with mobile mental health because I left the department 7 years ago, and that was really, we were starting to look at more community mental health clinics being built. Mobile mental health outreach, I think, is good. I'd have to look at what their protocols are, if they're going to particular locations, and how do they actually make contact with patients. We did something like that when I ran the community-oriented policing bureau. We brought government services to communities who just simply weren't going to go to City Hall, or they had no idea how to go to downtown, the Hall of Administration, or any of these places to get resources. And so we brought government to them and brought the resources to them and went door to door and handed out flyers. As a sheriff, we police 42 cities of the 88 in LA County. One of the things I really like to do is make sure that each station has a mental health and special needs liaison person on staff, so that Cecil has a special needs son. He's 18 years old. He's along the spectrum. He looks normal, but he's non-communicative. Sometimes he gets out. We need to know who Cecil is. So if we see him out there, we see his son out there, we can call Cecil up, or the son, we know who the son is, and we can identify that person and really treat them with the special needs that they have. So understanding having someone embedded that also works with that mobile mental health clinic, I think will be important. So I'm curious to see. I'll talk to Chief Sid over there to see how that works, and kind of do some collaboration with him. So I know Manny.
Yeah. So just to clarify the point about the Culver City Emergency Crisis Response Unit, is that this is a non-police response modeled on the CAHOOTS program that's been very successful in Oregon, and that Senator Kamlager just facilitated statewide through the Crisis Act. This is an alternative dispatch. It's a non-police affiliated. They have police for backup if things get violent, but but in Oregon, that's almost never happened in decades of use, and it removes an enormous amount of work from law enforcement, with far less danger to all parties and at far less expense. It puts more qualified people in the field and removes, it takes away, guns and uniforms and a military approach to a medical problem.
Sure.
So please do not talk to Manny Sid about this.
Okay.
I suggest that you contact Daniel Lee or Yasmin Imani McMorrin or Alex Fish, the city council members who've been advocating for and successfully, passing this program. It has actually been quite a struggle for those of us who are interested in more proven and professional models of mental health care to keep the police out of this process. They've been doing co-response for quite some time, which is very expensive and not very effective. It does not
Who
provide.
manages the program for you guys?
Well, they just hired this consultant, fellow who used to work out of with Cahoots in Eugene. So I think the best point, I'm not sure he's up and running yet. I think, like I said, contacting Alex Fish, Daniel Lee, Yasmin Imani McMorrin, or maybe City Manager John Nachbar would be the way to go.
Okay.
With all due respect, I don't think that Manny Sid will give you accurate information.
Okay.
Anyway, on that somewhat negative note, I want to, thank you so much for coming and spending time with us tonight and for joining our club. We welcome all flavors of Democrats and look forward to, engaging in a more broader, sheriff endorsement process. I think this is an extremely important race.
Yeah, definitely an interesting race, and it's very important. I've been in LA County since I'm actually adopted from Korea, but I grew up here in LA County. Yeah, my parents adopted me literally out of a photo album, and brought me to Compton, and I was raised in South Central. So I'm just a really regular, very regular kid, LA Unified School kid who is quite frankly blessed to even have this opportunity.
I wish we had time left to hear that story. But next time.
Yeah, then I found my real dad on Ancestry. He's the one who passed from COVID. I met him when I was 57. Yeah.
Wow. Well, I'm sorry. I'm sure we're all sorry to hear about your father.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the time, guys. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll see you again soon, and please stick around for the business meeting. So I'm going to stop the recording, and we'll get into our